Hey, it's that time again as we continue to go down our journey of fractions. And today we are going to be talking about the products of fractions. And yes, if you've noticed, just fractions. No, I'm not talking about whole numbers. We're going to talk about what happens as we start to multiply a fraction by a fraction. And of course, in this video, we're going to be talking about how to model that and what that looks like. So let's first break it down. Understanding again, when we use the term fraction in this case, we are constantly referring to those fractions that are less than one, right? So a fraction like 3 out of 4, a fraction like 5 out of 10 or 6 out of 8. These are all the types of fractions that we are going to use that are less than one. Because remember, the way that we're talking about this is the unit fraction is the 1 out of whatever. I guess I should have used the same numbers here. There you go. Like this. And the fractions themselves are when we put together multiple of those units. And then again, we want them to still be less than 1 because a fraction equal to 1 would be something like this. And we're not multiplying products of fractions and fractions equal to 1. We are just going to be multiplying fractions today. And again, I guess that is what we mean by products, right? The answer to a multiplication problem. So let's just kind of dive in with that today. Think about what we're doing again. Today, we're going to be focusing on what the model looks like. So kind of like why and what the outcome is of this. And as we move along, we're going to kind of put all of this together in another video about what are our basics about multiplication with fractions and whole numbers, fractions and fractions, fractions and mixed numbers, fractions and top-heavy fractions, mixed numbers and whole numbers. I mean, I could go on forever. Well, actually, I couldn't, and I'm not going to. So let's just dive in. So again, if we're thinking about this today, let's go ahead and start with this concept of 2/3. Let's say we're going to multiply that by 1/4. All right. Now, what we had done in the past, like with a whole number, is we're like, oh, cool. Yeah, I got 2/3 groups of 1/4. I do what? Okay, so that doesn't even really make sense because remember what we did before. We were like, oh yeah, 3 times 1/4. Oh, cool. That means I just have 3 1/4s. But conceptually, how do I really have 2/3 of 1/4? Like, how do I actually show 2/3 of a fourth? I have to take 1/4 and cut it into 3 and then have 2 of those groups. And then I'd like, right? So this system we've been doing about thinking about how we just use repeated addition and to help us with our multiplication, it doesn't work with fractions because it's a hard concept to really write out. So that's where the modeling comes into handy. So I remove pages because I already made a mess on this one. So 2/3 times 1/4. Well, again, if we thought about the concept of multiplication, I always like to think about that idea that multiplication is really shown through the concept of an array. And arrays are like areas. So in this case, we can always model our area. And we can do so in thinking about how I have an array that is made up of rows. It is made up of, oh, I wrote that in the wrong place. Hold on, reverse. Is made up of columns. Oh no, now I just misspelled it. Hold on. Ooh, columns and rows. And how it is that we really just multiply those columns or those rows, or in a square, we multiply the length times the width. So I'm actually going to do that today and show you how we can put this whole concept of 2/3 and 1/4 into a model to help us solve that. So here successfully now I've taken up 2 pages with the same problem and done 0 math, which now I'm going to take up a third. So here we go, 2/3 times 1/4. So what does this mean? Okay, well, let's start with our model, right? We know we're going to create this array that has rows and columns, but then how do we really think about what we know about fractions and what this looks like? So again, it doesn't matter which one I pick as my rows or which one I pick as my column. Right? Is because the commutative property of multiplication states that 2/3 times 1/4 will be the exact same thing as 1/4 times 2/3. We're going to get the same result. So I kind of like to take my first one and make it my rows. So what I'm going to do first, and I'm going to do this in different colors, and it does help to kind of do it in different colors, which isn't really a thing you have when you're using paper and pencil. So I'll show you what to do with that. But I'm going to start, and I'm really going to take my model and I'm going to cut it into 2/3. So the denominator says thirds. So I'm going to make 3 rows. And then you can see that I am going to shade in 2 of my 3. So I'm going to go here and shade in 2 of my 3. Okay, so that's my rows, 2/3. Now I'm going to change colors so you can see this. I'm going to take and I'm going to cut my column into 1/4. So I'm actually going to cut it into 4 pieces. So 1 down the middle, middle, middle. See where I went there? There's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. And I need to shade one of those columns. Now watch what I do here. I'm actually going to take and I'm going to shade kind of an opposite direction like this. Right? And that would be my 1 column. Now, here's actually where I get my answer of this, because again, what we're doing is we're multiplying 2 numbers that are less than 1. So actually my answer is going to be less than 1. It's going to be tiny. When we multiply fractions, we actually get very tiny products. So here's where I get. I'm going to look at my model and I'm going to think about, well, what do I have all together? Well, all together, I have 1, 2. Oh, that doesn't really show up. Let's use a darker color for that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I now have a total of 12 pieces. And as you can see, oh my gosh, the denominator is changing. That's a thing that we haven't had to do before. And then I'm going to look at how many are shaded by both my 2/3 and my 1/4. That part is a little confusing. And this is where it is. It's right here. See, I have 1 and 2. You see, that's where the orange and the red mix. So actually what I get out of this is 2/12. Now, of course, I always make that look very simple right away, but still confusing somehow. Yes, I have a great gift of making it look simple, yet still be confusing. So don't worry, we're going to do another one as we play with this, but I want you to really stop and kind of look, what did we do, right? We drew a model of the rows, we drew a model with the columns, and then we shaded and we saw where they cross over each other, and that's our answer. Vague. Let's try another one. I think that will just help. So let's see here. Why don't we do 2/4 and let's multiply that by 2/3. How about that? No, I'm going to change that because I already know that that's going to, let's say 2/6. Make it difficult on myself. Okay, cool. So 2/4 times 2/6. Now, again, if you notice from the last one, I actually didn't do anything to the denominators. So when we add and subtract denominators, we have to make, or fractions, we have to make our denominators the same. But with multiplication, we actually don't even have to worry about that. We just have to model what we see. So let's model what we see. I'm going to go ahead and take, and I'm going to make my model pretty big because what I recognize is that I have 2/4 over here. So I'm going to take this and cut this into 4 columns or rows. Oh boy, 4 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to shade in 2 of them. So again, kind of look at the way I'm shading because this is, I think a different shading technique is helpful for the modeling. I just don't want to color it in. I'm just going to do little lines like this. So there's 2 out of 4, right? See where I did that? Okay, now I'm going to go to my columns and my columns are 2 out of 6. So again, for my columns, I'm going to make 6 columns. So, oh no, that's wrong. We do thirds first. So there's thirds, there's 6. And then now I'm going to shade in 2 of my columns. So I'm going to go the opposite way here. Okay, so there's 1 column. And there's 2 columns. Okay, now to get my answer, I'm looking where I actually just have the blue and the yellow crossing over each other, shaded over one another, because that's actually what I have now when I multiply these together. I don't, as you can see, I don't have anything shaded here. There's nothing shaded there, so I don't count that. This is shaded, but it's only shaded in yellow, so I don't count that. This is only shaded in blue. So I'm actually this because that's what I've actually shaded in my model is the amount of pieces that have both the rows and the columns shaded together. So to get my answer first, I need to look at how many total squares I have in my gigantic model. So that's the big model here. And that's 4 rows times 6 columns. So that's 24 pieces. And then what's shaded is 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. right? Those are the ones that are shaded because they have both the blue and the yellow. So when I take 2/4 times 2/6, I get 4/24. So I get even smaller. Again, this gets really tiny. Okay, now I hope this is starting to make some sense. So let's see what we can do. Let's play with another one. Let's jump over here. So I don't know. I don't want to get too big because one thing you'll notice as I get really big, it's really hard to draw those models, but let's do it anyway. Let's say 6/10. Oh boy. And let's multiply that by 1/4. Okay. All right. Step 1, draw my model. Okay. I'm going to go with 6/10 as my columns just because it's bigger. So it's going to be easier to make 10. So that means I need 1 in the middle and then 4 on each side. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that gives me 10 columns. And I need to shade in 6 of them. So I'll start over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. Now I'm going to take my rows, which is 1/4. So that means I'm going to take my rows and cut them into 4 pieces. And then I'm going to color in 1 of them. Now, I guess in this case, it doesn't really matter. Typically, you want to like shade from the top or the bottom, but I guess I can see here that really doesn't matter which one I do. So I'm going to go down here. And again, I'm doing a row, right? So I'm shading in this whole row, including all these little columns in there. Okay. And now, again, here's the part that's tricky is I got to think about, well, how many pieces do I have? Well, I have 10 columns times 4 rows. So that would be 40 pieces. Hint, hint. But I have 10 columns and 4 rows. So that'd be 40 pieces. And then I got to focus on, again, the pieces that have both. In this case, I use orange and blue. So that would be this chunk right here. And that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. Right? So you can already see as I model these out and put them together, I start to see how I get what I get when I multiply 2 fractions together. Okay. All right. We're going to do one more. And then I'll kind of let you be. Don't want this to be too long, but I also want to make sure we get enough examples to make sense of it. So let's do one last one. Let's go ahead and take 3/4 and let's multiply that by, let's make it 2/5. A little trickier on this one. Again, as always, this is an opportunity to go ahead and pause the video and try this one out and then come back and watch and see how you did. So as always, welcome back from pausing the video. And if you haven't paused it yet, pause it now and go solve. And now back from pausing the video and solving. So let's go ahead and do this, right? First things first, I'm multiplying 2 things together. So it helps to model that. And I'm going to model that as an array. And an array is built up of rows and columns. So the first thing I'm going to do, I call my first fraction my row. And my second fraction my columns. Now this time I'm going to do it all using the black ink. So you can see what it's like when you're using a pencil, because you don't always have the luxury of getting different colored pencils to do this work. So let's do that and we can see how we can do this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the denominator of my rows, which is 4, which means I'm going to cut my rows into 4. And then I'm going to shade in 3 of them. So again, notice how I shade. Look at what I'm doing. I'm not really coloring. It's like a different style of shading. And I'm just coming across like this, creating some space so that if I have to shade the columns, you can see the difference. Okay. All right. And now I'm going to go ahead and make my columns, which means I need 5 of them. So that's 4 lines to make columns. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't do that evenly, so I'm going to redo that. Let's try again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I'm going to shade in 2 of them. Now watch what I do, right? Same color, but I put my lines the other direction. So I'm going to go like this. And you'll see this actually makes a pattern that you can then count. So there's 1 column. And here's my second column. Right? And now that's what we do. We want to actually count to see when both my rows and columns come together. Now, the denominator is going to be 20. And I know that because I have 5 columns times 4 rows. So 5 times 4 is 20. And then my new numerator is how many I have here, right? That has been shaded both the rows and columns, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So when we take 3/4 times 2/5, we get 6/20. All right, so I'm going to pause this there. There will be more to this as we continue our journey. Don't worry, as always, continue to ask questions. learn from mistakes. These are the numbers we love the most. And also know that it isn't about the answer. That's part of the math, but most of the math is the modeling and making sense of things. So like, if it doesn't make sense, keep trying. If it doesn't make sense, ask a question. Make sense? Watch this video again. If that doesn't make sense, message me and tell me that. And let's find a way so that this does make sense so that we really do feel successful. And as always, we appreciate you and your hard work, and we'll see you next time.